If you're looking for a new way to support Side Mission, check out Dubby.gg, an energy supplement company trying to make a difference. Make sure to use code Side Mission for 15% off your order. Thank you, Dubby, for sponsoring this episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by the boys, Kyle and Matt, and today we're talking about one of the most anticipated games of the summer, if not the most anticipated, and it's also one of the most anticipated of the year. I know this is, a game that a lot of people have been looking forward to. We're talking about Final Fantasy XVI. And man, this game delivers on the hype. I'm just going to come right out and say this is my point of view first. We're obviously going to get to y'all as well and what y'all think. I think this game delivers on the hype that it had behind it. And I think this is one of the best Final Fantasy games that we have received in recent memory. The gameplay is awesome. The story's really, really interesting, really well told. It's not perfect. There's absolutely some things that we're going to talk about as far as critique, and like we do with all games, that I think we all genuinely enjoy this game, fellas. One of y'all can speak up, or y'all can speak up and tell me now if I'm wrong in that.
Yeah, I think that this is probably the worst Final Fantasy game ever. Gameplay did not deliver on the hype. I think that this was probably the most lackluster story I've ever seen. I just playing.
Oh, no.
That's one of the best moments on the podcast ever.
He's got somebody right behind him. Square Enix got someone right behind him ready to slit that throat.
You about to hit me in the middle of in the middle of talking, and then just so I think this game sucks.
But no, on a serious note, I've been playing Final Fantasy for a very long time. This is definitely a step in the right direction when it comes to giving the series a little bit more maturity. I'm saying that word thrown around a lot, and it's absolutely true. Now, I'm not a big Game of Thrones fan, but I see that type of comparison get tossed around all over the place, and I get it. The setting is very much like that. The way that the map is split into like different domains is like pretty much that as well. Like you have the Kingdom of Rosaria, where your main character is from. You have Sembrek. And then you have like the more desert lands is the Dalmatian Republic.
Yep.
And I like the fact that each one of these has such a wide variety of cast of characters that represent where they're from. And what I think what I greatly love about this story is the protagonist Clive has such a complicated story. When you're starting off the demo, you start him off as young, and you realize he's a prince, and that he has another brother named Joshua, and that the gods basically choose someone to take over what is called an icon, which anyone who knows Final Fantasy and knows the summons, these summons are like these entities that dwell within what are called dominants. And Joshua was picked instead of Clive because Clive was rejected. And the dominant of fire chose Joshua, and you learn about that in the very beginning, and that that the Phoenix chose Joshua, not Clive. And I think what's really interesting is Clive comes from this family, and you meet his father. I believe his name was what was it? Elwin. Shit.
Elwin was playing most of the game. You tell me.
And Elwin is such a great character. He does not have a lot of time here, but from what we get from him, you can see he really cares about his boys, and that he definitely sees Clive as the type that is a good guard for his brother, because he was chosen as Joshua's shield. But his mother, on the other hand, because of Clive being rejected, she's just a total bitch to him and treats him lesser than a total bitch, man, and treats him like a lesser than. But
I've said this and this is going to be good for Game of Thrones. Cersei from Game of Thrones, the one good quality about her character is that despite how much of an evil piece of shit she is, she at least loves her children. Yeah, take that part away, and that's what Clive's mother is. Take that part away. Clive's mother is all of the negatives of Cersei and worse.
Exactly. So I just want to get through this section. I love the fact that they released a demo about probably for the first 2 hours of the game, which is basically the prologue. There's a lot to take in, honestly, as far as the story goes. During a certain part,
you're leaving a whole lot for the rest of us to talk about, brother.
I'll just leave it at this. I like the comparisons because I've seen this. As like there's a certain section of the game that is just really like cutthroat, and I mean that literally. And I actually I was playing that section. I was like, okay, this is giving me very much Red Wedding. Honestly, a little bit of a different kind of like purpose, but pretty much all the same.
Yeah, I think that people have really. You mentioned like how the word mature has been thrown around for this game, and a lot of people, especially when the demo first came out, were asking like, "Holy cow, why is it so graphic? Why is it so bloody? Why is it so gory?" Kyle, I think you sent the meme to us where it says that, and then it's the dude pointing at the M rating on the
Yeah.
game, and it's like, I don't know if y'all just missed that, but the game is not rated T; it's rated M. And I
Yeah,
like this. Again, it's a step in the right direction for a more mature version of storytelling because people who have really criticized the game for being more mature and have said like, oh, it just parades about it, but it's just more violent. Well, no, there's actually a lot of talk about depression. There's a lot of talk about suicide. There's a lot of talk about some really dark subject matter in this game that you have to
yeah.
be mature in order to be able to handle. And a lot of that is told in the game's excellent variety of side quests as well as the main story. So I think that, Square should be really commended for being able to make not only a story that's really interesting, but also side quests that are really interesting. That's a good thing. You need that in games like this. It's not an open world game. It more or less kind of has a map and you can go to wherever on it, but you have to fast travel to that area and then you're in that one confined area that, has the amount of content that, that area offers. That was a lot of uses of the word content in like 3 sentences, but bear with me. Now, before we heap more praise, let's go over critiques, because as we do with games that we really like, let's go over into the critiques and get those kind of out of the way first. Talk about kind of what we didn't like, and then we'll gush over this game a little bit more. Kyle, let's get the low hanging fruit out of the way, brother. There's a lot of fucking cutscenes in this game,
Bro.
and it is to an overbearing degree in the early game. It is almost all cutscene. I remember, I think I timed it up when I started the demo. I think it took about 5 minutes before I actually was given control of my character. It there's that much cutscene in it. Like it took 5 full minutes of cutscene, and then it was walk 5 steps, cutscene, walk 10 steps, cutscene. And these cutscenes aren't just 15, 20 seconds long. These are 2-3 minute long cutscenes to where it feels like you're watching a movie. And Kyle, I know that was a big negative for you, especially early on.
Yeah, I gotta say that I think when a game looks as good as this does, I can excuse a little bit of extra cutscenes because I enjoy looking at the game. I think that this game looks and performs very well, and I mean, it's definitely not something that, I want to see less of, because I think that they did a really good job. However, I don't need a cutscene. I don't need more cutscenes than gameplay. Because
Yep.
that's how the entire first part of the game is. And it's so annoying when the combat and the gameplay, just in general, is really, really fun, and I'm having to, trudge through all of these boring, talkative cutscenes. Like, most of it is garbage. Most of it does not need to be said. I'm gonna be honest, Square Enix could have taken half of these cutscenes out. Story would have still been amazing. I think if you want to read this much, go play Mass Effect. This is not a Mass Effect game. This is a Final Fantasy game where, yes, they do have a good bit of dialogue, but I have never played a game before in my life where there were more cutscenes than dialogue, and I wasn't joking about that. Like, I'm not kidding. The first 10 hours of this game are cutscenes because you are going to fight one battle, and then you're going to go into 10 more cutscenes, and then you're going to do two boss fights and go to more cutscenes, and then it got to a point to where I was actually skipping cutscenes because I would have turned off the game if I didn't. I got so fucking bored, and it's hard for me because I have the worst ADHD out of anybody. So like,
I feel that,
you
yeah.
know, it's really hard for me to just sit there and watch a movie when I'm trying to play a game because that's not what I sat down to do. If I mentally prepare myself to sit down for 2 hours and not move, it's because I'm going to watch a movie. But when I sit down to game, I'm trying to, get that enjoyment out of it. I'm trying to do something, and I could sit here and watch cutscenes on YouTube if I wanted to.
Yep.
You know, I just started skipping the cutscenes because I just stopped caring about, everything that they were saying so much because I just wanted to play the damn game. The game is so much fun. And honestly, I think that this game, once you beat it and there's no more cutscenes, it's gonna be a perfect game. This game's gonna be fucking amazing because then you can go around and you just get to enjoy all of it, which is all I want to do. I think that this game not being open world is such a good choice. The last game I know was open world, and it was a little bit different for Final Fantasy because Final Fantasy 14 was not open world. So to go from not open world to open world to not open world again, it's a little bit of whiplash, but I can say that I think that after having 15, because I got bored with 15 and I just stopped playing because I just didn't care about that game. I really didn't. And
Yeah, 15 was a very highly criticized game, and I had no idea about that until this game came out, to be honest
yeah,
with you. I had no idea that it was criticized that much. I thought I had fun. I had fun with it from what I remembered, but I did remember there being a lot of issues.
yeah, it's and I think that a lot of that stemmed from the open world. I think if it had been more linear, it definitely would have been a
Yeah,
lot better. This game being linear is a big advantage because,
absolutely.
like you said, you go to a certain area and you can just explore everything that area has to offer. And when you're done, you move on to the next area. And, Final Fantasy 15 being open world, I felt very overwhelmed with all the shit I was supposed to go do and explore. And there was constantly new, markers coming up for, hey, there's something here to look at. There's a boss here to fight. There's treasure over here. There's side missions over here. This game, especially Final Fantasy games are known for being just massive, and this
Yeah.
game benefits so much from not forcing you to run all over this giant world, you know, because it's gonna have enough runtime. I promise you, with the amount of content they've put in this game. I don't think that you're gonna run out of things to do. The biggest problem is holding your attention through all of the cutscenes. Because some of them are great.
Yeah.
It's just the amount of
On
them are
that
just us
topic,
talking.
yeah. On that topic, I will say that the good thing about the cutscenes is I felt, especially after the first 15 chapters, which I know that people are going to hear that a chapter is just a mission or just a quest. That's all the chapters are. Each chapter is just whatever main story quest that you're on, and then it goes from there. There might be some where you have to do a side quest or two to kind of progress the game, but that's neither here nor there. I feel like once you get past the first like 15 chapters, the cutscenes kind of start to dial back a little bit, and it kind of gives you a little bit more freedom. It gives you a little bit, it loosens the reins a little bit on you, and says, "Okay, we know you're probably wanting to play more of the game. There are still cutscenes, but they're not nearly as prevalent. They're not nearly as long, and just grindy. Grindy's not really the right word there, but they're just not they're not as prevalent as they are, especially in the epilogue and in the game's first 15 chapters. Because listen, there are people out there that love cutscenes. I myself love a good cutscene. I love a good cutscene that tells me a great part of the story. There are a lot of cutscenes in the first 5 to 10 hours of this game that you could do without. There's quite a few you could do without, or you could do with them being lessened a little bit. And again, listen, for those people out there that love cutscenes, fucking weirdos that like cutscenes over gameplay, I guess. Like, sure, you probably had a ball with this, but especially when the combat is as fucking awesome as this game's is, it is really jarring to go 5 steps cutscene, 5 steps cutscene, one battle cutscene. It's really jarring, and at a certain point, Kyle, you mentioned it, you just start kind of like skipping through dialogue because you just kind of want to get back to the combat because that's what you're here for. The story is really good, I will say. After kind of allowing all of that, after getting through that opening section and getting through those first 15 chapters, I'm in the 40s now in chapters. I've not finished the game, and I think Matt's a little bit further than me, but I could be wrong. At least at this point, I feel like Matt should be ahead of me. He's played it a lot more recently than I have.
A chapter ahead of me,
I
actually.
am
Yeah.
okay. Fair enough. So, like, we've all played quite a bit of the game. Obviously, the story's really good. It's really interesting. It's just that it is very easy for new players or for players that, Kyle, you've said before that you weren't really a big Final Fantasy guy. you're not winning anybody over in those first 15 chapters. You are giving people reason to either skip cutscenes or to put the game down. And that's a problem because the story elements are good, but when you have the cutscenes that are that overbearing, it ruins the experience. It takes you out of the experience because the gameplay single-handedly is what carried me through those first 15 chapters. The boss fights carried me through those first 15 chapters. The combat sections carried me. That is ultimately what got me through those areas. Kyle, you had something to add.
Yeah, so I will say that, like you said, with the story, a part of it that makes it so good is they've removed the sanitization filter. This game is rated M, and it's rated M for a reason. I think that this game is not held back by that M rating. Yes, some younger fans might not get to play this for a few years, but I
Oh
think
well.
the amount of people who picked this game up versus the amount of people who didn't because of the rating, it's heavily ratioed. I mean, the people who picked this game up because they saw that M rating was so much greater than those who didn't. And it benefits. It benefits greatly because I feel like the dialogue is
Absolutely.
so much less. Not that Final Fantasy dialogue has always been really cringy. It's just, when these games get held back and they're trying to cover deep topics like this. I mean, like, dude, in the prologue, in the demo of the game, they not only killed this kid's father right in front of him, then they killed the kid in the damn demo. That shit was
Yep.
crazy. I was like, this is brutal, this is violent, this is so much darker than Final Fantasy has ever gone. And it's something that Rusty and I, Matt, talk about a lot when it comes to movies, like especially superhero movies. Sometimes you don't need that sanitization because if you just let it go all out, it will do numbers. It will sell because there's that mature audience out there who's looking for something like this. And I think this absolutely scratched that itch for Final Fantasy players, especially people who grew up with the series. We're adults now. Those of us who played the, original Final Fantasy games growing up and, even some of the newer ones like, 11, 12, 13, we're out of high school. We are adults now, and I like to see when franchises evolve with their audience because while I understand not every kid is going to get to have the same Final Fantasy experience I got growing up, I think that catering it for those people who did grow up with the series that are going to stay loyal to the series is a big plus.
Yeah, I think, and that's one thing I've liked about Final Fantasy for a while is that Final Fantasy and Square Enix has done a really good job of this. They typically evolve from game to game. They change something up from game to game, whether, from 15 to 16, for example. The big difference is this game is not open world. This game is a lot more linear, and it's not just one gigantic world that you have to traverse for every single quest. So I think that it being more mature and it evolving from 16 or from 15, that is such a big deal. And I like how Square Enix has done that. I'm really impressed with that. Matt, the other thing that really carries the story, and because we've talked about the gameplay a lot, the combat is very similar to like Devil May Cry and, the power ups that you have, the use of the icons, those are really awesome. But I feel like also the big part of the story is the characters, man. And this is some of the best that we've seen I would say in a while because 15, I liked Noctis and I think one of his friends. I liked Gladio, but I didn't really care much for Ignis. Didn't really care much for Prompto. Didn't really care much for them. This is the first like Final Fantasy that I've played in a while, not including 7 Remake, that I thought the characters were really standout. I think Clive is an excellent protagonist. And I think Ben Starr, considering that he doesn't have a lot of credits that I could find to his name, did an excellent job voicing him. The younger Clive voice was hella fucking annoying. Not gonna lie. Was not a huge fan of that voice. His older voice, significantly better. Significantly better. And then I think that, you add in, I don't know who it is that voices Jill, but I think she's an excellent main character as well. And then the scene stealer, Matt, fucking Sid, dude.
Oh yeah.
Sid is a scene stealer in this game. The characters in this game are great.
Yeah, I love the fact that it kept the tradition of keeping a character in the game named Sid. They had a bit of a twist in Final Fantasy 15 where it was Sydney, and so that was really cool. But I think when we're talking about characters, when you're talking about such a heavy story driven game, that you have to have a great main character, a great protagonist, a great antagonist. You have to have great, support characters, and that's honestly what they did really well here. I like everyone that you end up meeting, like from the beginning of the demo where you meet, Clive's friends, his guard with was it Rodney, the guy who
Wade,
trained him.
yeah.
Yeah, like Rodney, and then you meet Wade and you meet Tyler, and they're a great supporting cast. And then as you're further into the game, you meet Martha. Why did you say that name? But that's definitely one thing that you have to have in a game like this. And Jill is an excellent side character to go with Clive. Like, I like the relationship building. I like the fact that they were childhood friends, and later on in the game, you find out that she was taken. And she ended up being a dominant and becoming the icon of Shiva.
Yeah.
And more characters that you find that have icons are just really freaking cool characters. Like, they have attitude, they have style. Benedicta, she's fantastic, and her icon is Garuda of wind. And then you have Hugo Kuka, and he has the Titan. And then Sid was one of my favorites. He had the ability of lightning, and I can't remember the name of his icon. I believe it was I always said Odin one time, but it's not Odin. But then you also have the icon Bahuma, and like I said, being a Final Fantasy fan, I love seeing the fact that they took the summons and they incorporated them into the story a lot better than just being someone that you summon by using a bunch of your MP. But the characters in this game are so well written, and there's a lot of twists that are coming. And I mean, I even felt myself on the verge of not tears, but just I felt a heavy feeling in my heart when something happens, and just the unpredictability of what's going to happen. And as I'm playing further into the game, my biggest fear is oh no, please do not kill Torgal. Please do not. I love that little guy. I love the fact that there's a trophy locked behind petting him 5 times. He's an excellent assist to have in these fights. And and they really did an excellent job with the characters. And based off of previous Final Fantasy games, this one is more geared towards the West. This is more of a Western, not like that, like cowboys and stuff. But it's not very much
in America. Yeah,
exactly. It's not very much geared towards the Japanese. Final Fantasy VII is very much heavily geared towards the Japanese. I like the fact that this game is just more grounded. It's more dark and it's more mature, as we've said before. And I'm currently, I believe, 6. Well, I have 6 trophies from the story, so I don't exactly know what chapter I'm on. But I like that with each time that you start up a new chapter, or when you're going back to the cutscenes, these are the kind of cutscenes that I like watching. These are the the world building, the things that are going on. We even have a time skip, which I thought was really interesting. As Final Fantasy 15 also did a bit of a time skip too, but it didn't really work as well for me as this one did.
Yeah, I think that's also because in Final Fantasy 15, I think the time skip in that game is 30 years.
Something like that, yeah.
It skips ahead a lot. This one, thankfully, at least the time skip that we're aware of, that I don't know if there's another one later, is only 5 years. That's not as big of a jump as 30 years, 40 years, which the one in Final Fantasy 15 is you get to a point late in the game, and then it just puts you in this gigantic time skip, and it's what the fuck? There's more? But exactly. Thankfully in this one, I think the other thing that works a lot in this game, there's a lot of twists in this one. Specifically after Chapter 15, and this is what led to me binging over the launch weekend of the game. A reveal that a certain character might not have been as dead as we thought.
Yeah.
Being back. That reveal empowered me through the next probably 10 chapters. And again, it just, there's certain twists and certain ways, things that are done in this game and this story that will have you on edge, that'll have you wanting to know what happens next. And again, that's complemented very, very well by the Devil May Cry kind of combat that style of combat here. Again, using the icons, because you find out that Clive is actually the dominant for Ifrit, and that's obviously a major figure in the Final Fantasy lore. So when you find that out, like the moment where I saw the words, Matt, because I know you've seen them, I don't know if Kyle has seen them. When the words "press L3 and R3 to accept the truth" popped up,
Oh, that was fantastic. That was great.
that was one of the most epic moments in a game that I've played in the last 3 or 4 years. That boss fight is one of the best moments I've seen, because the boss fights are incredible. We talked about the Benedicta fight early, and then also Kyle, we talked about the Garuda fight, dude. Like, for an early game boss fight to be as epic as that is, it's just really impressive.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think that this game definitely they do things on a scale that has really impressed a lot of people, because there's some games that are known for having giant battles like that, like Dark Souls, like God of War, and I think it's really fun to embody this character who, is obviously a minuscule, size compared to the enemy you're about to face, and then seeing that you took down that, gargantuan of a beast. It's sort of a feeling of accomplishment when you do that, and there's nothing more epic than fighting a monster, fighting an enemy that's just 10, 20 times your size and overcoming it. I think that there are a lot of games that have really shown, really good examples of that. And this is another one to add to the book. I see a lot of people really praising the boss fights and the combat, and it's, like we've said, the strongest suit in this game is the gameplay, is the combat, because that's where I cannot put it down. I wish there was more. This is the first game where I don't care if you got, little enemies for me to fight. I want to fight every single, thing in this game. I'll fight everybody in this game. I'll fight you.
I've gone out of my way to fight some bitch ass scorpions.
Literally, because
Exactly.
I go looking for the fights because they're so fun. But I agree. The boss fights in this are definitely on another level.
Yeah, it's some of the biggest spectacles we've seen in gaming. The first Garuda fight is incredible. The mid-game fight with Titan is awesome as well. You fight Typhon, in that big well at one point that is just really cool. There are so many things about the boss fight and the spectacle that really take this game to the next level. Again, we talked about a lot in the Diablo episode about presentation and how much that helps that game's story. The presentation in this game really does carry it through and carries it across the finish line, and it just takes it to that next level. And again, the big important thing, again, nowadays in games, performance is really good across the board. It's a beautiful game to look at. There's next to no frame rate drops that I've encountered, and I don't know that you guys have encountered.
Obviously, during combat, yeah.
Oh, you have? Okay, I didn't know that. But have they bothered you? Has it happened enough to bother you?
Oh, no. There's so much action going on. I'm like really paying attention.
That's fair. I guess I was just curious. I know that obviously the big thing that's come out on social media has been that obviously there are some fights that are causing people's PS5s to overheat a little bit.
Yeah.
And I have not had that happen. It's unfortunate if it's happened to other people. I don't love that that's happened to other people, but I'd imagine that that's something that can be rectified with maybe cleaning the dust out of your console like I did earlier. maybe taking the base plates off and making sure there's no rats or anything stuck in the base plates or stuck in the fans. You might want to do that. But again, I think this is just such a high quality game that, it's got the issues at the start with all the cutscenes and it just kind of being a little overbearing. But man, when you take that away, it feels like this really is a Game of the Year contender right there alongside, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It feels like this can compete with Spider-Man 2 and Armored Core and, the Super Mario RPG Remake, all these games that are still coming. It feels like this game really can compete with all those. And if you told me that it won, I really couldn't complain because I think it's an excellent game. I think my vote would still go to Tears of the Kingdom for right now. But I think this is an excellent game that's a 9 at worst. And I think when you say 9 at worst, that's pretty impressive. I think if the cutscenes were a little less overbearing, which to kind of go into detail more on that, the game is about 30 hours long if you just focus on story stuff, which 68 chapters in 30 hours. Boy, you are cramming if you do that. But for the sake of, that's what people have said, is it's about 30 to 35 hours. Well, the problem is there's about 10 hours of cutscene, and I don't love that about a third of the game is cutscene. Yeah. I would much rather it be a lot closer to 6 or 7 hours of cutscene. I'd rather it be, I think you could shave a few hours off and not lose much. But again, that's nitpicking. I think this is a great game, and I think both of you also believe this is a great game. So I'm really pleased with it. It's a game that I feel like, and I said the same thing about Diablo, I don't question why I paid what I paid for this game. I don't question it. I think that I got my money's worth, and I'm really, really happy about that. It's an excellent quality game. Final Fantasy 16. Obviously, you've been listening to this episode. You know we loved it. But we move on to the real Game of the Year contender, because up next we got Pikmin 4. The real Game of the Year contender. We got the Grinch. The Grinch stole Christmas video game coming later this year.
I'm gonna do an entire episode by myself on why we need a PS1 Grinch remake, and this side scroller garbage that they're giving us is not enough to hold those of us who are. And I'm telling you, the Grinch PS1 has the biggest fan base out there. I don't care about Final Fantasy. I don't care about Legend of Zelda. I don't care about Mario. It's bigger than Mario. PS1 Grinch is the greatest game to ever grace your disgusting little eyeballs, and I swear if we do not get a remake of the game, this side-scrolling garbage is not gonna fly.
I was ranting for the night. You know, Kyle, you put more energy into that than I think I've ever seen you put into anything for the podcast. So I love it. I love it. That is a great place. Before we go further off the rails, that's a great place to call this an episode, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So, that is going to wrap up this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow the rest of us as well if Elon is still, unless he's still limiting how much you can see, and you might be a Twitter goblin like me and Kyle are. But you can follow us there. You can follow us on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. For the boys, for Kyle, for Matt, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.